Emma opened her eyes, already knowing something was wrong. The light through the blinds was too bright for 6 in the morning, and her body carried a heavy, overslept feeling. She reached for her phone and stared at the screen until the number made sense. 8:41. Her pitch meeting started at 9. She was out of bed before she finished the thought, pulling on the blouse draped over the chair, already wrinkled from being grabbed in a hurry. 6 years of work had led to this presentation. If it went well, she would make partner by year's end. If she walked in late and unprepared, none of that would matter. She grabbed her charcoal trousers from the closet and glanced at the digital alarm clock on her dresser. It read 7:50-2. She stopped moving. Her phone said 8:41. The dresser clock said 7:50, nearly an hour apart, and both couldn't be right. She walked into the kitchen and looked at the microwave clock above the stove. It read 6:18. The laptop on the counter showed 9:03. 4 devices, 4 different times, none agreeing. For a moment she almost laughed. A power flicker maybe, or her own tired eyes. Her phone now read 8. If that was right, she had 17 minutes to reach a meeting that was normally a 25-minute drive away. She noticed the mechanical clock on the shelf by the window, the one that had belonged to her mother, wound by hand out of habit more than need. Its hands read for 15. That, at least, she could dismiss it, ran slow if she forgot to wind it. But the others had no such excuse. Her phone synced automatically. Her laptop synced automatically. They should never disagree. Not by minutes, and certainly not by hours. She pressed her palm flat against the counter, forcing herself to think instead of panic. The meeting was for the Hollis corporate campus, the largest contract the firm had chased in years. Daniel Cho, the senior partner who had mentored her since she started, had said privately that if this presentation landed, her name would be on the partnership vote by December, and this one morning, she couldn't even determine what time it was. She grabbed her keys and portfolio bag, deciding to trust her phone since it was least likely to have drifted. Her hand was on the doorknob when she noticed the note, that it sat on the counter beside the coffee maker, half finished in her own handwriting. Reset. The pen rested beside it. She didn't remember writing it, or standing at that counter since making coffee the previous afternoon. She read it twice, feeling something cold settle in her chest. The window above the sink was open. She was certain she'd closed it the night before. She always did. Ever since a break-in nearby had unsettled the street, now it stood open several inches. The curtain moving faintly, someone had been in her apartment. The thought arrived, whole and terrifying. She thought of the clocks again, all wrong in different directions, and wondered whether someone had deliberately changed them, to disorient her, to make her doubt herself in front of Daniel and the entire Hollis team. There wasn't time to search the apartment or call the police. She locked the door, checked it twice, and ran for the stairs, texting Daniel as she went. Running a few minutes behind, on my way. On the second-floor landing, her neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, was retrieving her mail, still in her house, and looked up at Emma's rushed footsteps with open curiosity. "You're in a hurry," Mrs. Alvarez said. "Big day." "The biggest," Emma said, not stopping. "Sorry, I can't. You were up late." Mrs. Alvarez called after her, not unkindly, just observing. "I heard your door around 3. Thought maybe you had a friend over." Emma froze on the stairs for half a second. 3 in the morning, give or take. "I don't sleep well myself." Mrs. Alvarez shrugged and went back to her mail. Emma kept running, but the comment followed her down the stairwell and into her car. She hadn't had anyone over. She lived alone. If her door had opened at 3, either someone else had opened it, or she had. She called Claire from a red light, needing a voice that wasn't her own frightened thoughts. Her sister picked up on the second ring, already alert. "Emma, it's not even 9. Are you okay?" "I think someone was in my apartment last night," Emma said, the words tumbling out. "The window was open. There's a note I don't remember writing, and Mrs. Alvarez heard my door at 3. There was a pause longer than Emma expected. "Emma," Claire said carefully, "you called me at 3 in the morning. Don't you remember?" The light turned green. Emma didn't move until the car behind her honked. "I didn't call you," she said, though even as she said it, something at the edge of her memory shifted, faint and unplaceable. "You sounded normal, a little slow, but normal. You said you couldn't sleep and wanted to check on the mechanical clock, the one that was Mom's. You said something about needing to fix the time before the meeting. I told you to go back to bed, and you said you would." Claire's voice had turned more clinical. "You really don't remember any of that?" Emma's hands tightened on the wheel. She didn't remember any of it, and yet each piece Claire described slotted into place with what she'd found that morning, forming a shape she didn't want to look at directly. "I have to go," Emma said. "I'm almost there. I'll call you after." She hung up and drove the rest of the way in silence, trying to remember something that felt like reaching into a dark room for a switch that wasn't where it used to be. She parked outside the Hollis building with 6 minutes to spare by her phone's count, though she no longer trusted it. Reaching into her bag for a mint, her fingers brushed a folded slip of paper she didn't recognize, a pharmacy receipt, dated a week earlier. She unfolded it and saw the name of a prescription she'd picked up after weeks of telling her doctor she couldn't sleep anymore. Not since the funeral, not with her mind running through unfinished conversations with her mother every night. She remembered reading half the instruction sheet before deciding it was fine. that every medication came with unlikely warnings nobody actually experienced. She hadn't listened to the voicemail. The pharmacy left 2 days later. It was still sitting unheard in her phone, a small red notification she'd meant to get to for a week. She played it now. Sitting outside the building where her career was waiting, the pharmacist's voice was calm and apologetic, explaining that some patients experienced episodes of confused, semi-conscious activity in the first 2 weeks on this medication, walking, talking, even making phone calls with no memory of it afterward, and that the risk rose when combined with exhaustion or missed meals. The voicemail asked her to call back with concerns. Emma sat with the phone against her ear, watching people move through the glass doors toward the meeting that was supposed to define her year. She thought of the note. Reset the, not a warning from an intruder, but an instruction to herself, abandoned halfway by a version of her that had been awake and moving with no memory being formed at all. The window had been opened for air by someone who wasn't present enough to remember closing it again. The mechanical clock's hands had stopped at 4:15, not because she'd forgotten to wind it, but because she had wounded and reset it herself, in the night, trying in some half-conscious way to fix the one thing that still felt fixable. There hadn't been an intruder. There had only been her, alone, unraveling quietly for months, and a medication label she hadn't read past the first page. 2 minutes until 9. She thought about walking in and saying nothing. It would have been easy. Daniel would never have known. Instead, she called his office line and said the truest sentence she'd said out loud in 8 months. "Daniel, I need a few extra minutes before we start, and I need to tell you something first." She walked in at later than she'd ever allowed herself to be, and found Daniel waiting outside the conference room. She told him briefly about the medication, the sleepless months since her mother died, the night she couldn't remember living through. She still wanted to give the presentation, she said, but needed him to know why. Daniel listened with the same measured attention he gave to blueprints, then nodded slowly. "The Hollis team can wait 12 minutes, he said. "Go splash water on your face. Then come in and do what you're good at." She gave the presentation 40 minutes late, her voice steadier than she expected, and the Hollis team signed a letter of intent before lunch. Daniel told her afterward that the partnership conversation would happen in December as planned, but that he expected her to actually take the days off she was owed, and that he'd be checking. That evening, Emma sat on her living room floor with her mother's mechanical clock in her lap and wound it by hand until the second hand ticked with the sure rhythm it hadn't managed in months. She set it to match her phone, then adjusted the wall clock, the microwave, the laptop, until every device in the apartment agreed on the same quiet hour. For the first time in longer than she could remember, every clock in her home told her the same thing.